City Talks enable us to have a conversation with our Sydney community about the really big issues that we face, such as climate change, inequality and resilience. We bring together great thinkers and visionaries from around Australia and across the globe to talk about important issues from a global perspective.
Find out the important lessons and let's get together with young people and start passing those lessons on.
It is a little bit concerning. I find that Australia is still in the crossroads of energy and climate policy once again.
All groups in our society are paying a high price for the magnitude of the inequality.
We're the first generation to fully understand the dangers of climate change and the last generation with time to do something about it.
Why do you think some women balk at the term feminist?
I think there are two reasons. One is that the word is distorted and people don't know what it means. And the other is they do know what it means. And it's a profound change.
As biological beings, we have an absolute need for clean air, clean water, and clean energy from the sun. Without those things, we either sicken or we die.
Decarbonizing the economy is the best vehicle through which to improve the well-being of citizens, cities, states, and nations.
Every city basically built freeways, as we call them.
2 decades.
Beautiful things or reinvigorate these things, and then we...
really a regional effort.
What happened in the Middle East with the Arab Spring?
If we're here amongst friends, let's agree now.
Hearing a lot of the discussion here tonight about equity and equality.
That is a systemic thing, and no amount of being strong or tough or brave as an individual will be sufficient to overcome that.
For Australia, the question is, will you choose policies that lead to more inequality and lower growth, or will you choose an alternative path that can lead to less inequality and higher economic growth?
Sydney is a great place to talk about this new era because you've already started to transform your city and bring this new vision to life.
Through these free events, we want to inspire, to educate and to engage with you, our city community.
Welcome everyone to our first live and online City Talk for 2021. A green-led recovery featuring Jane Fonda, bold action for a more resilient future. My name is Patricia Karvelis and I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where we stand today, the Gadigal peoples. I pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. The purpose of this City Talk is to progress a national conversation about the urgent action needed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and climate risks, improve affordability and to drive economic activity. Now, before I continue, and I can't wait to continue, I want to invite Yvonne Weldon from the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council to welcome us to her country.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, sisters and brothers. I stand before you on the land of Eora. I've grown physically on this land, but in my blood and always in spirit, I am Wiradjuri. My name is Yvonne Weldon. I am a sovereign woman. I come from Cowra here in New South Wales, from the waters of the Clare, which is also known as the Lachlan, and of the Murrumbidgee Rivers. I am the elected chairperson of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, who are the culture authority under the Aboriginal Land Rights Act for the land that I am on. I would like to pay my respects to all elders past and present, to all First Nations, to you and the ancestors' lands that you are on. Welcome to country is an age-old tradition. It is more than just words. It is a spiritual process by honouring the ancestors' footsteps we are all walking in, continuing the practice of the many generations before us to the many generations to come. The boundaries of our traditional owners are written into the Earth's natural landscapes. The boundaries of the Eora are the Hawkes River in the north, the Nepean in the west, and the Georges River in the south. On behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, the elders and the members, I welcome everyone to the land of the Gadigal. I acknowledge the Gadigal people and the people of the lands that you are on, whose spirits and ancestors will always remain with this land, our Mother Earth. Across this continent there are hundreds of nations, tribes and clans that have existed here for over 60,000 years. My people are the oldest living culture of the world. And as we are all joined online, let us all remember and acknowledge the many warriors that created pathways for all of us, the ones recognised and the ones we've never heard of. My people have always listened and learnt from each other, the environment, animals, elements and our ancestors. We don't live in isolation of body, culture, spirit, land and water because we are one, for in our blood it runs. We need to reflect upon our footsteps we're leaving to know where we're heading, shaping a society, a country we can be proud of. And in these times of this pandemic, don't let the social distance make us socially absent. We must maintain physical distancing, but not creating barriers to our social connections. So whether it's for your work or your networks, creating an inclusion, an acceptance and a resilience. All of us together can bring about positive changes to multiple generations, starting a healing to the past generations by declaring what should not have taken place, to the present day generations giving them hope and creating a future for the next generations, for everyone in this country. We are in this together and we can achieve positive change each and every day, bringing my people, your people and all our people together. As you consider and listen to the views being presented today on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and climate risks, improving affordability and driving economic opportunity, remember to reflect about my people's stories and the connection to this land that were forever changed when we were erased from the view. My people lived in unison with this country for thousands of generations, learned from our ancient practices because we are still here. Think about the difference you can make today that will become the milestones of the future, all our futures. So let us all draw upon my people's spirits as we continue on our journey. May my people's spirits walk with you and guide you as we strive forward for us all. Again, on behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, welcome to Gadigal land. This always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. Thank you.
What an incredible welcome to country that is, and what a privilege it is to be on Aboriginal land. In the past year, Australia has stood up to confront enormous challenges. The drought, storms and catastrophic bushfire season followed by the COVID-19 pandemic have really challenged us profoundly. Governments and businesses, communities have shown the ability to collaborate and to act urgently to address these challenges. It is time we take a similar approach and accelerate bold innovation and urgent responses to what is a climate crisis. I was lucky enough to catch up with Jane Fonda to discuss her lifetime of activism and how she's now turning her attention to the urgent need for action on climate change. Along with Jane, we will be hearing from some incredible leaders taking bold action tonight. I'm actually incredibly excited by this guest list. I want to thank the City of Sydney and the Lord Mayor Clover Moore for allowing us to have what is a very important conversation at a very important point in time. Just a bit of housekeeping, if you can just stick with me for a minute on this. Here are some of the rules on how to view and to listen. Please mute your sound and turn off your video function during this event. Live captioning is available, so click the CC icon on your viewing screen to turn that feature on. And from whatever platform you are watching, feel free to ask the panel a question. I have lots of questions, but you are welcome to ask questions too by writing your question in the chat box for our excellent discussion a little later. Our first speaker tonight is actually the woman behind this event, Clover Moore, the Lord Mayor of Sydney. Clover Moore has been the Lord Mayor of the City of Sydney since 2004. Under Clover's leadership, Sustainable Sydney 2030 is providing the framework for action on environmental issues, with particular focus on reducing emissions and alternative energy. Please welcome Clover Moore.
Thank you, Patricia, and good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our City Talk-led recovery. I would like to thank Yvonne for her welcome, and I too would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to the elders both past and present, and also acknowledge the present-day Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who live in our city and the people of the very many nations. I would like to welcome and thank Jane Fonda, Patricia Karvelas, Lily Madden, Professor Ross Garnaut, Independent MP Zali Steggall, Minister Matt Keane, Lisa McLean, Victor Stevenson, and at the end we will hear from Makasha. So I'd like to just start off by saying that the economic shock of COVID-19 has been felt across the world and has devastated the lives and the jobs of many, particularly in our cities. Australia has handled the economic and the public health challenges of the pandemic better than most, and our economy is recovering faster than others. But we face an uncertain economic future with the withdrawal of JobKeeper, the uneven global economic recovery, the mounting debt and the escalating tensions with key trading partners. But the greatest threat continues to be accelerating global warming, the economic, the social and the environmental consequences of which are staggering. Action on climate change has been portrayed as detrimental to economic growth, but that it's an either-or choice, and this is so wrong. The economic threat is recognised by our key economic regulators, and the EU is considering carbon tariffs on imported goods within the next 2 years. Australia cannot afford to continue to be blind to the economic risks of inaction on climate change, especially as we know that action on climate change will drive innovation and sustainable economic growth as part of a green-led recovery. For every $1 million invested in renewable energy or energy efficiency, 7 jobs are created. This compares with 2 jobs for the same investment in fossil fuel. United Nations, the World Bank, the OECD are urging governments to look to green alternatives to improve both the economy and jobs by investment in technologies and projects to address climate change and restore the environment. As the OECD has outlined, that cleaner air, cleaner water, effective waste management and better protection of biodiversity together reduce a community's vulnerability to pandemics, improve resilience and bring opportunities to boost economic activity, generate income, create new jobs and reduce inequalities. And Australia has abundant wind and solar resources to power green industries at home and to export renewable energy. A key to achieving a green-led recovery is setting ambitious carbon reduction targets. A net zero by 2050 target is the Paris Commitment and is being adopted by state governments, industry and companies. Yet the federal government hasn't just been absent in leadership. It has actively blocked the development of a green, sustainable economy and thrown its support behind a dying fossil fuel industry. However, the climate change bill introduced by Independent Zali Steggall, which will set a net zero by 2050 target for Australia and provide a framework to deliver emissions reductions, provides an opportunity that I'm sure Minister Angus Taylor will embrace with open arms. At the City of Sydney, we committed to Sustainable Sydney 2030 in 2008. We set our targets and we've taken action and we report our progress every 6 months. We committed to achieving 50% renewable electricity and 70% reduction in emissions by 2030 and net zero emissions by 2050. We became carbon neutral in 2007 and we were the first Australian city to install energy efficient LED street and park lights on a large scale as part of a $7 million project which reduced emissions by 2,000 tonnes annually, and that was a saving that's been a saving of $800,000 a year. We've even undertaken to pay Ausgrid to fast-track replacement of the remaining 9,500 streetlights, which they own. Why are we doing this? Because it will save over $1 million in energy and maintenance costs and 3,400 tonnes of carbon a year. We retrofitted 40 of our properties to reduce electricity and water use, slashing carbon emissions by 6,500 tonnes and generating savings of more than $2.3 million. We embarked on one of the largest rooftop solar programs in Australia, installing 9,000 on city-owned buildings. With transmission provider Transgrid, we installed a 50 kilowatt Tesla battery at our new depot in Alexandria. Together with 1,600 solar panels, We will avoid 600 tonnes of carbon emissions each year, and we have plans to install more. We are now on our third fleet of electric vehicles, and the city's fleet emissions are 16% below 2006 levels. We were the first city in Australia to introduce car share, and we began our bike network back in 2008. And I think what is so inspiring is that we work in partnership with the private sector to reduce emissions citywide. Our leading program includes the Better Buildings Partnership, City Switch Green Office, the Sustainable Destination Partnership, and the Smart Green Apartments program. The Better Buildings Partnership is an example of how action on climate change can be good for business and the economy. The partnership currently represents 59% of the commercial office space in the city centre. That's the global city of Australia, with members including major building owners like Dexus, Lendlease, Mirvac, GPT, as well as UTS. They committed to our Sustainable Sydney 2030 goal and have already reduced their emissions by 55%, and they're tracking towards an 83% reduction by 2030. And they've reduced their water use by 26% since 2006, and they're saving over $30 million a year. While partners that own 88 buildings have committed to achieving net zero emissions or becoming carbon positive on or before 2030. Since 2006, our city economy has expanded by 53%. In that time, emissions declined by 21%. If it had been business as usual, they would have increased by 57%. Our city operations switched to 100% renewable electricity in July last year, which will enable us to reach our 2030 target of 70% emissions reduction 6 years early in 2024, and at the same time saving our ratepayers $500,000 each year for 10 years. And we have created jobs in regional New South Wales, in wind and solar farms in Glen Innes, Wagga Wagga and Shoalhaven. We're now bringing forward our target of net zero emissions by a decade to 2040. This is already driving new initiatives, like our proposed new requirement for net zero buildings. Development applications for office buildings, hotels and high-rise apartment blocks will have to comply with a minimum energy rating in 2023 and achieve a net zero energy output by 2026. So I want to say in conclusion, the New South Wales Government, now with Matt Keane as the Minister for Energy and Environment, has an ambitious plan to make the state a renewable energy superpower. Cheap, plentiful renewable electricity can be the foundation for renewing Australia's manufacturing sector and developing clean, heavy industries like green steel. It will also support the introduction of electric vehicles, now a foregone conclusion as car manufacturers phase out reliance on fossil fuels. Sydney is well placed to be at the centre of this green-led recovery. As a key global financial centre, we have the resources and the knowledge, the capital and the services for green new industries and to be a leading international carbon services hub. And Sydney has some of Australia's leading universities, as well as startups and companies that have for years been working to reduce emissions and build a sustainable future. Investment in a green-led recovery provides new opportunities for the economy and for the future employment, and it will help Australia retain its international competitiveness and build a low-carbon, sustainable economy. It is critical that we actively and energetically pursue these opportunities. And I hope and I know that you're going to find inspiration and energy from this evening's City Talk. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much to the Lord Mayor Clover Moore for her address tonight. Our keynote tonight is trailblazer, activist and legend Jane Fonda, who I was lucky enough to speak to for this excellent event. Now, Jane Fonda, she's clearly someone you know. She's an Academy Award-winning actor. She's a producer, she's an activist and she's an author. At 83 years of age, Jane continues to dedicate her time to activism, supporting global issues such as climate justice, inclusion, diversity, civil rights and also equality. In October 2019, Jane Fonda started these Fire Drill Fridays. It's a movement which uses celebrity platforms to empower environmental activists and to lobby for progressive climate change legislation. Here is my conversation with Jane Fonda. Jane Fonda, welcome, and what a pleasure it is to be joined by such a trailblazer and an absolute legend.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to see you.
Jane, you have dedicated your entire life to activism as well as having an incredibly successful career. I want to get behind your passion for climate activism. Why is it that you've invested so much of your personal energy on this activism? What inspires you?
Well, because if we don't wake up and understand what a catastrophe we're facing, the future may not be livable. I have grandchildren, and all those millions of young people that rose up in 2019, it was the largest global demonstration in history. And they said, come on, wake up, people, old people have to join us. So okay, I'll join. Here I am, I'm old. And so I just tried to think, well, what is something that would really get people's attention and help them realize the urgency of what we're facing? This isn't just like, there's this issue and that issue. And this is the overarching, like the Russian nesting dolls. There's all other crises in the middle, but the outside nesting doll is the climate crisis. If we don't deal with that, we're talking about maybe a civilizational collapse.
Look, I think you make those points beautifully and passionately. Let's talk about you hosting those Fire Drill Fridays live, which have become such a key and significant event. You've been arrested. You have taken enormous personal toll and really taken it up in a way that I've really not seen for a very long time. What is it about this kind of direct action that you think is effective?
Well, you don't start off with civil disobedience, but we've been marching and protesting and petitioning and lobbying and writing for 40 years. And the elected officials haven't listened to us. So you have to take it up, the next step. And historically, you can look from the Boston Tea Party here in the 1700s to Mahatma Gandhi's civil disobedience that won India's independence from British colonialism, to the freedom fighters, Martin Luther King, and the sit-ins at the lunch counters in the South. All these things, what they did was they called attention to people. Notice they started paying attention to the issue, whether it was racism or colonialism or taxation without representation. They started paying attention. And so, I knew, and I worked with Greenpeace, and Greenpeace knew that this was a time when we have to start asking people to be willing to engage in nonviolent civil disobedience. Now, being white and famous, I wasn't really risking anything. It was almost symbolic. But I knew, I was 82, people were going to say, well, God, if she could do that, maybe I could too. And sure enough, people started coming from all over the United States. And people came from abroad too. There was people from Poland, for example, and England. And they came and they engaged in civil disobedience, and they risked arrest with me. And they'd never done it before. And that's the goal. There are 25 million Americans who are really alarmed about the climate crisis, and they haven't done anything because nobody's asked them. I'll ask. Great unasked. Come on, join me.
I just love the way that you own your own privilege like that. I'm white and I'm famous. So I want to ask you this question. How important is it to actually use those identities to push this issue forward? Rather than just being, aware of them, but to actually use the privilege to raise these issues?
Well, my view is that those of us who have this kind of privilege and have a platform have a responsibility to try to use it. The metaphor that I use is, how on the top of mountains you sometimes see these big tall antennas sticking up. And the purpose of those antennas is to pick up the weak signals down in the bottom of the valley and bring them up over the mountains so they have a big, wide audience. That's what we are, celebrities. We're like antennas that can pick up the voices of the people that really need to be heard and bring them to a wider audience. And that's what I loved so much about Fire Drill Fridays. We had celebrities introducing Indigenous women, you know, frontline workers, the people who never get heard, never have a platform. They were able to tell their stories because a celebrity drew the crowd and then introduced them, and they got to speak. It was just wonderful, and we've continued with it.
Let's talk about how you kept Fire Drill Fridays going during the devastating pandemic, which has really, well, crushed the world, but really crushed your country specifically. Talk to me about how you managed to keep the momentum on, as you say, the biggest issue in the world, which is climate change, through the sort of online way of keeping Fire Drill Fridays alive.
Well, we were worried, obviously. You know, when everything got shut down, we thought, uh-oh, what are we going to do? Well, let's give it a try. You know, I had never had a kind of a broadcast program where I interviewed people, but, you know, one important thing in life is to always be ready to step outside your comfort zone, right? So together with Greenpeace is like the wonderful loving arms that surround me, that keep me safe and strategic. We decided that we were going to start doing it online. And I mean, they kept watching. It was a combination of things. You know, we didn't have to remind them that climate was a problem. You know, countries were on fire. There were floods, there were droughts, there was freezing. You know, I mean, people were beginning to experience it. And so it was very present, number one. Number two, everybody knew that an election was coming, and they really, really, really didn't want to have Trump get reelected. And so it was just a combination of, you know, also with the terrible murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and others, the violence against Black people in this country, and the rising up that happened all across the country, the diversity of that uprising, not just Black people, brown, white, young, old. And we were able to help people understand that if you know, like a cook who's rendering fat down to its gravy, if you render the climate crisis down to its essence, its roots, what are those roots? Racism and colonialism. Those are the roots. If it wasn't for that, there wouldn't be a climate crisis, because human beings would not be commodified, etc. That's a complicated one, but it's important to keep that in mind. So when the uprisings against racial violence happened, we were able to bring Movement for Black Lives speakers, you know, and others on the show to talk about the nexus, the interconnection between racism and climate. And, you know, people, they're learning. They're really learning a lot. And so they just keep coming. Do you know that in 2020, we had over 9 million viewers across all platforms?
It's actually an incredible achievement. I really am in awe.
I just think it's the right thing at the right time, and we keep continuing, and we have anywhere from 70 to 100,000 people every Friday. When Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was on, we had 600,000 people one Friday. When Trump's niece, Mary Trump, was on, we had 400,000 people. I mean, you know, I'm so excited.
Your numbers are great. Look,
but what's great is they don't just show up to watch the show and learn. They volunteer, they sign up. You know, thousands of them made calls to climate voters who sat out the last election. And it really made a difference. And again, what's so great is that these are people who'd never done it before. So it's a new demographic that's coming into the climate movement.
Look, COVID-19 has changed so much of the world's focus, crippling the world, and really it's devastated so many deaths. So much destruction, so much pain from this virus. Are you concerned about the impact it's had on keeping climate change on the agenda as the number one issue?
You mean, was I worried that people were going to move away from the climate crisis because of the health crisis?
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. And also, I suppose, the ongoing nature of this pandemic. I mean, it's not over.
Well, in the beginning, I was, but we were able, you see, to make the connections. What happened, I don't know in Australia, but in this country, several things happened. First of all, this thing hit, and people realized when a pandemic hit, when a crisis hits, you need a robust federal government. You know, all this stuff about, oh, big government, we need to flush it down a bathtub. We don't want, fine if everything was perfect, but when a crisis happens, you need a big government with a plan. And there wasn't one. And boy, did people's eyes get opened. Oh my Lord, what happens when there's no plan? There's no federal government. So that's one thing. You know, the other thing is a little bit more well-off middle-class people really saw and their hearts were touched by all the people, mostly people of color, immigrants, women, who are the essential workers. And they weren't given protection. They weren't given masks. They had to work even if they were sick. They worked under really dangerous conditions. And people saw that. And they saw that these women and immigrants and people of color could barely get by, barely put food on the table. They couldn't take a day off, even if they had COVID. And so people were banging and applauding at night, you know, when the nurses were, but that's been translated into, we have to fight for them. We have to help them unionize. We have to make sure that going forward, no teacher, healthcare worker, domestic worker, childcare worker, delivery person, supermarket worker, none of these people should have to live in constant anxiety. And I just think, you know, it's like a drunk when you've got to sometimes hit bottom in order to want to start getting well. We hit bottom. We hit bottom not just because of all the pain and suffering of COVID, but because people's eyes were open in a new kind of way. And then our responsibility was to show the connections between those things and the climate crisis, and why it is that the people of color were the most affected by COVID, because they live where fossil fuel refineries and petrochemical company, the smoke and the pollution and all of that stuff, they put those things in communities. They call them sacrifice zones, where people of color and working class people live. And so they were already damaged. Their lungs were damaged. So they were much more vulnerable to COVID. Then people began to understand. Oh, I see, you know. So then the notion of environmental justice, when we start confronting where we are, Biden is doing that, confronting the climate crisis, the first place the money has to go is where those people live, in the sacrifice zones. The people have been the most hurt so far from the climate crisis and now from COVID. And we're so excited. Biden really gets it. I mean, he's putting huge amounts of money that are going first to those communities.
Well, I was going to go to the election of the Biden administration and how much of a game changer that's been on this issue. Do you think we're seeing the kind of shift both in your own country, but clearly with the United States being such a global force internationally, to try and shift the focus back on this climate emergency and to actually trying to tangibly deal with it?
Yeah. Can I tell you, it feels so good to feel hopeful again. Make America hopeful again. His appointments to the cabinet secretaries, for example, give us a lot of hope. Gina McCarthy, his domestic climate person, who I know is, and I just finished watching her giving a lecture on climate leadership. So good. She really gets it. There's John Kerry dealing with the international picture, and I hope he does a good job there. Biden, it's like, that's Joe Biden? I mean, I never would have thought Joe Biden would do what he's doing. You know, in American history, a major inflection point was in the 1930s with the Great Depression, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt, because people pressured him, not just on his own, but because there were millions of people in the streets, that's the key thing, he turned the government into an activist government. He created safeguards for workers. He created Social Security. He created the middle class. It was a big, activist, bold, brave government. And that continued for quite a long time until Reagan came along. And that's the second inflection point. Reagan, and, you know, when I say Reagan, it's really, you know, everybody around, all the people around him, and Thatcher in England. The problem is big government. We've got to get rid of big government. And so corporations took over the government, and collective bargaining, unions, any notion of the collective was like poo-pooed. You know, individualism is what matters. And that really set us on a very, very bad many decades, very bad. And that lasted until Joe Biden? Who would have thought that Joe Biden would be the next inflection point where the government appears to be making brave, bold moves? You know, never mind austerity, never mind the worrying about, you know, inflation, trillions of dollars, which is what is needed. You know, the dealing with climate together with the fallout from COVID, you need jobs, so make them green jobs. You need your bridges and dams and buildings and waterways and sewage systems to be strong, because the weather is going to get ferocious even more than it has now. And we have to have our infrastructure resilient so it can withstand it. Jobs. So that's what Biden is doing. Now we have a terrible Senate, you know, we have to work real hard because the Republicans have gone down a dark rabbit hole. But we're hopeful, and Biden, everything he's doing is just great, and we just have to keep pressuring him.
Look, our own national government has been criticised for its failure to take enough action on the climate emergency. Australia is yet to promise it will reach net zero emissions by 2050. Our own Prime Minister says he hopes to get there, he's hopeful, but it's not a sort of tangible promise. And that's, of course, been pretty contentious here at this stage, although there is some movement, it appears. What's your advice then to Australian activists or people passionate about these issues about how to push on this issue?
Organize. You can't do it. This is a collective crisis that can only be solved through collective action, not individual action. So look around where you are. What are the organizations? There's a very robust Greenpeace in Australia. Join an organization. You'll meet like-minded people. It's very joyful. Join an organization and then fight like hell. You need unprecedented numbers of people in the streets, forcing the government to do what you want. And one of the things that we all need to learn, and we're learning here, and they've certainly learned in Canada, is we have to do it hand in hand with our Indigenous people, because they know, you know, if the Australian leaders had listened to your Aboriginal people, the fires wouldn't have happened that way, because they know how to manage them. The same thing is true here in California. You know, the Indigenous peoples that lived up and down the coast, the West Coast, the Chumash, they knew how to manage fire, but we never listened. And now we have to lock arms, stand in solidarity, and move forward in huge numbers. Think millions of people in the streets making the demands, not as individuals, but as part of an organized protest. We have to force them to do it because the future is at stake.
Jane Fonda, I want you to reflect, if you can, on the intergenerational nature of this fight. Of course, it was Greta Thunberg who really led the young people across the world, and I know inspired young people, of course, across the world, but in Australia we saw a huge movement of young people standing up. You identified yourself as one of the older people who joined in at the beginning of this interview. Talk to me about the importance of those links. Older people joining young people, mentoring young people, listening to young people to try to make this a broad movement, if you like, to actually make it something that's not sort of just based on small groups, but people working together.
That's right. Thank you for that question. Greta inspired me very, very profoundly because she speaks the truth, because she's on the spectrum. She calls it her superpower, and she's right. Something about the way she speaks and the way she thinks that you know that it's the truth. And she's powerful. I've spent about a year and a half talking to young climate activists. It's just heartbreaking. So many of them have had dreams of being doctors or physicists or all kinds of career dreams, including just going to college. So many of these working class kids dreamed of going to college, and then they say, no, we have to devote ourselves to fighting against the climate crisis. They're giving up their dreams in order to fight to ensure that there's a future. They're not having children because they're not sure there's going to be a future to grow up in. It's psychologists are giving it eco anxiety. There's all kinds of new words for this grief. In fact, all of us, young and old, are carrying grief. We're in mourning because whether we want to think about it consciously or not, it's in our bodies. We know that we are losing billions of species every year. We know that no matter what happens, even if we do everything right, there are still billions of species that are going to go extinct. There are going to be huge tracts of this globe of ours, this blue planet, that will be uninhabitable, even if we start doing the right thing now, because so much heat has been baked in, because the fossil fuel companies lied to us for 40 years, so we didn't start soon enough. We have a decade left and we have a shrinking carbon budget. No new carbon development. So because these young people are fighting so hard to have a future, I think the least we can do, us older people, is join them. What have I got to lose? They're so smart. Oh my Lord. I mean, I've been in many meetings.
Speaker Jane Fonda is. Obviously, I'm a big fan, but I did not expect anything quite like that. She's incredible. I'm so excited about introducing our next speaker. Lily Madden represents the next generation of climate activists and was a school student for Climate Striker. Lily is a proud Arrernte, Budjalong and Kalkadoon woman from Gadigal country and a First Nations consultant from Groundswell. Lily is the Sydney coordinator for Indigenous Youth Climate Coalition Seed Mob, Australia's first Indigenous climate organisation. Here is Lily Madden.
Warda. Hello there everyone. My name is Lily Madden, and I stand before you as a proud Aboriginal woman, as a daughter, as a granddaughter, and a great-granddaughter. It is because the people of my past that I stand here today, in the present, for the future. And given this country's recent past, it's a miracle I stand before you at all. Because we are resilient, we have survived. But we won't survive the climate crisis unless we act now. I was asked to come here today to talk to you about the issues we are facing here in Australia due to the climate crisis. But the climate crisis is happening all around the world right now. This is something that did not come out of nowhere. It came from the decisions and actions of humans. We have changed the fundamental chemistry of our atmosphere, our oceans, our deserts. We have changed how our climate system operates. We have witnessed a scary and destructive series of events, from out-of-control bushfires to rising sea levels, the bleaching of reefs, to heavy downpours of rain causing flooding. But this is just the beginning. It scares me, just like it scares you. Especially the thought of what this means for our children, who we pass this earth on to, and the living and breathing species other than humans, who have done nothing to bring this suffering upon themselves. Have we gone too far? Could we possibly create the change we need to see for a sustainable way of life? But that is why I'm here, and that is why I do the work that I do as a volunteer. For this crisis, it is an opportunity to truly take the right step into the future, to come together. For Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, we have lived sustainably in this country for tens of thousands of years. Tens of thousands. And yet, this global crisis was created over only a couple hundred years. Once making up 100% of the population in Australia, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people only make up 3% today. And after all that my people have been through, after all of our loss and suffering due to invasion, we are on the front lines of this crisis, the biggest challenge of our time. Having done the least to cause it, we are the first and worst affected by it, even though we are already at such a vastly disproportionate socio-economic disadvantage to the rest of the population. Not only is this unjust, not only is this unfair, it is even harder to see this happening to the ones you love, to your old ones, and what it means for the lives of our young ones just growing up, and for the ones who haven't even been born yet. I feel that responsibility, and I know it's a responsibility we all feel. But what is most important is truly the timing of our actions now for our futures. There is a word from the heart of Australia, where my grandfather's country is from, in Mbantua, or as many of you may know it as Alice Springs. Arinjika, forever ongoing, an Aranda word from a truly age-old country of wonder and beauty. I love my country, and I feel that love for it in the center of my chest, where the soul is when I think about it. Up where I'm from, you have 3 spirits. 2 who are from each of your parents, from their parents' spirits, your grandparents' spirits, and your great-grandparents' spirits, and so on and on and on. But there is a 3rd spirit that makes up who I am as an Aboriginal person, who we are. And that is the spirit from the land, where all life comes from and where we return to rest. As Mayani M.K. Turner, a knowledge holder within our community, says, we are the land. The land is us. And that is how we hold the land. And that is why it is so important to protect it. And that is exactly what Seed Mob are doing. We are standing up to protect our land, our water, our culture and our future. In the words of Miss Jane Fonda herself, when she was protesting at Standing Rock, she says, "We are witnessing the flowering of the seeds that were planted there, and again, it is the youth who seem to be leading the way." And that is who Seed Mob are. We are a movement made up of young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people working towards climate justice. We are standing up within our communities to fight to protect our country for a just and sustainable future with strong cultures and community powered by renewable energy. Because we know that fossil fuels are fueling this climate crisis, but our Prime Minister, our government, who are elected by us to care for us, are planning the opposite. They are the ones fueling and funding this crisis. This year's City Talks theme is a green-led recovery, but our government is planning a gas-led recovery instead by fracking in remote Aboriginal communities such as the Northern Territory and the Kimberley in Western Australia. And one of the first companies leading that charge is Origin Energy. Fracking in the Northern Territory will create 5 times the emissions of Adani's coal mine and blow our carbon budget, limiting our ability to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees under the terms of the Paris Agreement. Not only does fracking release methane, which is 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide, it also threatens our precious waterways. 2/3 of Australia is already considered to be arid or semi-arid, pretty much one big desert really, making us the most vulnerable in the developed world. And in places like the Northern Territory, where communities rely 100% on underground bore water from our basins and our water aquifers, many Aboriginal people will tell you water is life, and without it, we can't survive. Fracking consists of drilling underground into these basins and under the water table. Fracking just one well in the Northern Territory requires a toxic mixture of hundreds of chemicals as well as 10 to 35 million litres of water. Fracking companies are currently planning for hundreds, if not thousands, of these wells across the NT, each of which could be fracked numerous of times over their lifespan of up to 40 years. This is what truly scares me. As humans, we are made up of 60% of water. We cannot afford to sacrifice this precious life source. The benefits of fracking are short-term, but what we threaten if we let this go ahead will be lost forever. This land, our land, has to be stopped as being seen as something that we can plunder. It is living and breathing. We are its caretakers, just like it cares for us. The government cannot sacrifice our land, our country, our culture, and our very futures by putting it into the hands of a dirty and destructive gas industry. But Seed Mob are standing with traditional owners and Aboriginal communities who are on the front lines with the help of multiple other movements and amazing allies. Yesterday, actually, I was on the phone to my sister and founder of Seed Mob, Millie Telford, who was in the community of Borroloola, 1,200 kilometres north of Alice Springs, in the Cape of Carpentaria, where companies plan on fracking first. She was in the middle of a community protest march, marching for the protection of their water. Over the last 3 years, I have volunteered with Seed Mob. I've had the opportunity to be a part of some amazing movements and help create change locally, nationally, and internationally. One of my most special moments I've been a part of was our major Water is Life gathering, where over 200 First Nations and non-First Nations people came together in Canberra to peacefully occupy the foyer of Parliament House. coming to the doorsteps of the politicians, asking them to step up to create the change that we need to see now. Since that time, I've also been able to meet and work alongside some amazing people from other organisations such as Get Up, Original Power, Pacific Climate Warriors and Groundswell Giving. This is who Seedmob are. Seedmob is about working together with our communities because we know we have the knowledge to lead the change that we want to see. Will you join us? Whilst communities from all walks of life are coming together to protect our land, water and climate, Scott Morrison is continuing to prop up the dying gas fracking industry and line the pockets of his fossil fuel mates. Enough is enough. Will you stand with traditional owners and Aboriginal communities by signing our petition calling on the federal government to rule out public funding to bail out the dangerous and destructive gas industry? Together we can, and together we will create the change our world so desperately needs. To show your support, head to seedmob.org.au. So, I am hopeful that we can listen to the heart within us to protect what we love and lead with our hearts. Because I believe that love is the strongest force within our world. And what I hope for is for all of us to truly understand that we only have one world. We are bound together. And finally, in conclusion, I'd like to leave you all with the same word that I began with. Arinjika, forever ongoing. This is not just the land of our ancestors, it is our ancestors. It is a part of us. We are a part of it. It's time to change, to protect it. Now and Arinjika, forever ongoing. Kalamwara, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lily, and what an inspiring young leader she is. Our next speaker will be no stranger to you. He has been a key voice in the climate change space. Ross Garnaut is an economist and is a professorial research fellow in economics at the University of Melbourne. In his most recent book, Reset, Ross Garnaut shows how the COVID-19 crisis offers Australia the opportunity to reset the economy and to build a successful future, and why the old approaches aren't working anymore. Please welcome Ross Garnaut.
Thank you, Patricia. In my book, Superpower, which came out in late 2019, just before the pandemic, I explained how making use of Australia's low-carbon opportunity can raise our incomes, expand our economic prospects. It was a good way forward. The new book, Reset, Restoring Australia After the Pandemic Recession, explains how now it is the one way that we can move forward to full employment and rising incomes. The pandemic has dealt a big blow to the economy. The Australian government has done a good job in emergency measures to provide a cushion under employment. We've run by far the biggest peacetime deficits in our history with expanded government expenditure. That's been good for employment and that's been reflected in early recovery of economic output almost to the levels of before the recession, unemployment fallen almost to the levels of before the pandemic recession. In Reset, I explain that we have to do much more than that. The measures taken so far focus on short-term measures to provide employment through debt-funded government expenditure. For full employment to be achieved, and we were a long way from full employment before the pandemic recession, for full employment to be achieved and for ordinary Australians to return to rising incomes after the recession, after 7 years of stagnant incomes, then we're going to have to see the government expenditure joined by business investment in export industries. At first sight, now is a very difficult time to make growth sustainable in Australia by adding investment in the export industries to the government expenditure that's put the cushion under employment so far. We face some very big headwinds. One headwind is that 22% of our exports are coal and gas, and all of the developed countries of the world other than Australia and China, our biggest export market, are all committed to zero net emissions by around the middle of this century, just 30 or 40 years away. So nearly 1/4 of our exports are going to be on a declining path. That's a big headwind. Second headwind is that before the pandemic, the most dynamic part of our export sector and our third largest export was our education sector, our universities. They've been financially deeply damaged by the recession and won't be sources of the same sort of dynamism for quite a while into the future unless we take special measures to strengthen them, restore their strength. And of course, we face headwinds from the difficulties in the trade relationship with China. So these headwinds would make us a bit pessimistic about our prospects from turning the short-term emergency growth in employment into a sustainable movement to full employment and rising incomes. But what makes all the difference is that the pandemic and its effects on the politics of the world has actually strengthened the opportunity for Australia to make good use of its low-carbon opportunity. At the beginning of the pandemic, it did not seem likely that this would be the outcome. There was a risk a year ago that the urgent issues of health and recession would divert attention right around the world from the great long-term issue of climate change. In practice, we've come out of the pandemic, or we're getting towards, hopefully, the conclusion of it, with much stronger global commitments to dealing with the climate problem than we had before. The United States, as we heard from Jane Fonda, has recently changed leadership to a president deeply committed to achieving zero net emissions by the middle of the century, zero emissions in electricity by 2035. Most importantly of all, deep commitment to not only achieving these outcomes in America, but making sure that the rest of the world achieves them as well. It's only zero net emissions that will stop the upward trend in temperatures. There's already been a lot of damage from the temperature increase we've already had. There's some more locked into the system. It'll keep on increasing until we get to zero net emissions. 2050 is a long time ahead. There's a lot of warming that can take place up to 2 degrees from increases in emissions between now and then. But it's what the world is currently committing itself to as a good starting point. Once we have shown that we're making progress towards that and that that's strengthening, not weakening our economies, then we can assess whether we should go further and try to contain temperature increases to 1.5 degrees. With the whole developed world, other than Australia, and China committed to zero net emissions, the natural resources of Australia have new sources of value. As I explained in Superpower and in my new book, Reset, Australia has the richest combination of wind and solar renewable electricity resources in the developed world. This is a huge advantage for exports in the zero emissions world economy. we have the richest coal in the world for turning iron ore into steel. But that's not much of an advantage for Australian industry, because once it's been sent from New South Wales coalfields or Queensland coalfields to Kobe in Japan or Shanghai in China, it's just about as cheap there as it is in Australia. That won't be the case. That's not the case with renewable energy. International transport's a much higher cost in renewable energy. That's going to give a very big advantage for industry at home. The energy-using industries are going to be a new source of strength for Australian business investment and exports. Our second great advantage is that we've got more opportunities for storing carbon in our landscape, for export of carbon credits, and for growing biomass for zero emissions plastics and chemical industries than other countries. By utilising these huge opportunities, we can set ourselves on a path of full employment and rising incomes after the pandemic recession.
Thank you so much to Ross Garnaut for his wonderful address. Okay, so we've reached the part of the night where I get to pick the enormous brains of our panellists, and you get to ask some questions too. But before we begin, I just need you to stick around to the end of this broadcast, to the end of the night, because after this wonderful panel, Indigenous performer Micasha joins us to deliver a song that she's actually especially written for tonight, which reflects her deep passion for caring for country and the environment. So you must stick around to the end of this panel discussion, which I'm looking really forward to hosting now. Now, some brief introductions to our excellent panellists tonight. Matt Kean MP is the Minister for Energy and Environment and the member for Hornsby in New South Wales. Now, the New South Wales Electricity Infrastructure Roadmap was launched by Mr Kean in late 2020 and has promised cleaner and cheaper energy for customers. I will ask him questions about it. Zali Steggall OAM MP is an Australian politician. She's a lawyer. She's the independent member for Warringah. In late 2020, Zali introduced what's now become known as the Climate Change Bill. Lisa McLean is also with us. She's the CEO of the New South Wales Circular. It's a government-funded circular economy innovation body leading the transition to a zero-carbon circular economy in New South Wales and Australia. Victor Stephenson is a descendant of the Tagalaka people of North Queensland. He's an Indigenous writer, filmmaker, musician and consultant, and applies traditional knowledge in a contemporary context. And of course, Ross Garnaut, who we've just heard from just a moment ago, addressing us all. So we will get to Micasha after this panel discussion. Stick around for that. But let's start this conversation. And I'm going to start with you, Matt Kean, because you're kind of the man of the moment, the man, if you look at sort of our federation, that's been leading the way on some of these issues. New South Wales is committed to net zero emissions by 2050, but it's aspirational, right? So what are the impediments to getting there in your view?
Well, I think there are a number of impediments. There are some parts of the economy we know how to decarbonise in a way that lowers costs and sets us up for success in the future. But there are some areas in the economy that we don't have the technology yet to do the abatement that we need to get there. So my view is that we need to focus on those parts of the economy where we can decarbonise, but do it in a way that lowers costs and creates jobs and drives investment. And that's why we introduced the Electricity Roadmap, to effectively modernise our electricity system in New South Wales, to move it towards renewables in a way that will lower power prices and underwrite our prosperity for the future. But we know, for example, agriculture, that's a bit of a tougher nut to crack. So we need to, in the meantime, while we're getting on with decarbonising the electricity system, come up with the techniques that we're going to need to be able to decarbonise agriculture and other hard-to-abate areas of the economy.
What do you need at a federal level?
We need all levels of government working together if we're going to solve this problem. I really think that we need to set strong targets like we have in New South Wales that will focus the minds of not only government but industry and also the community if we're going to get there.
Zali Steggall, you've actually introduced this national framework proposing changes. It's a bill that you would like to get debated, but of course, you know, it's not really the way politics works. You're trying to break that business model, but the business model is there's a government and they don't really like independence bills, right? If I could be blunt.
Sure.
So what are you trying to do here? You want to take the politics out of this, but the politics has been embedded in this climate discussion for so long. What is the kind of framework that you're trying to create here?
Sure, but I mean, one of my main motivators of getting into politics was actually I was tired of the climate debate being positioned as a left or right issue. I think this is an issue that will impact us all, and ironically, it is where we have so much economic opportunity that it really should be everyone's priority. I would answer to part of what Minister Keane addressed was the issue we need to address those sectors that are going to be harder to decarbonise. So what the Climate Change Bill does is it legislates net zero by 2050. So it sends a very clear signal to our trading partners, we are committed to this. It sets the roadmap of how do we get there, 5-year emission reduction budget, so that it's clear the industry, the market can know what to expect. But it will also drive technology. So for those areas that are hard to abate, that need the solution, they will know there is a roadmap, there is a commitment by the federal government to find the solutions. But also the elephant in the room is that we have to talk about our risk assessment and our resilience. Australia has been battered by climate impacts and we know there is more to come. We need to legislate that as part of the Climate Change Bill to ensure we're addressing all those risks and our communities are prepared. It is already costing us so much money addressing all these impacts. We're always reactive to what happens from climate. We need to get on the front foot. We need to start preventing. We need to start planning.
Ross Garnaut, you reckon a carbon price is kind of dead, but that the pandemic provides opportunities. What would the benefits be of legislating? Because at this stage, I do think there's been a pivot from the Prime Minister. He does say he wants to get to zero net emissions. Like, he wants it to happen. The world order's changed. We've got Joe Biden as president in the United States. But what kind of mechanism do we therefore need to sort of force change?
I think legislation and commitments by government that make it very clear that unequivocally we're going to get there turns the mind of leaders of business who haven't yet got there. One of the exciting things in the last year or so is that very large parts of world and Australian business have realised they've got to get to zero net emissions by 2050 or earlier. Microsoft has committed to zero net emissions by 2025, defining net emissions over the whole life of the company from the time that it was formed. So they want to buy negative emissions to get there. But there's lots of parts of Australian society, lots of companies whose head is not yet in that space. That will get all of their heads in that space.
Look, Lisa, I want to bring you in because you're working on this sort of circular economy model. You reckon we can't get to net zero emissions without tackling this issue around consumption and biodiversity. What do you mean by that?
Well, look, the circular economy is a new economic framework that allows us to actually extract more value out of resources that would otherwise be going to landfill, thrown away into landfill, flushed away into our oceans, causing pollution. And the reason why we absolutely need this framework is because we cannot tackle, we've got about 55% of emissions will be tackled through the renewable energy transition, but there's 45%, as Minister Keane was saying, 45% of emissions that are embedded in products and also through food production. So we really need this new framework to get there. It's a $2 trillion economic opportunity. And it's also being market-led. So we're seeing companies producing as-a-service products. So whether that be white goods, what a relief. We can actually get white goods as a service instead of throwing our washing machine out onto our curb, which is what everybody hates doing, but we have to do. We can also get fashion as a service. We can look at other ways of getting the things we need. We don't need to always own something. And I think that's something people of City of Sydney are very familiar with. For example, they have the highest rate of shared mobility membership in Australia. So they understand that they can get shared mobility as a service and save themselves about $8,000 a year from the cost of owning a car. So obviously, as we're heading into a resource-constrained future with, 10 billion people on the planet by 2050, this is the only thing we have. The circular economy is the only economic framework we have to take us forward and to grow our economies. And I also think that it's a welcome relief in terms of a narrative about the future. Where are we going to get our future jobs from? How are we going to grow these new industries? How are we going to embrace our Indigenous practices around regenerative farming and quite frankly build up systems that are going to maintain our planet and be productive for our agriculture sectors. And the circular economy is the answer.
What a great segue you provided me there. Thank you, because Victor, the work you do, you're the co-founder of the Fire Sticks Alliance. I think there was no greater moment, everyone will agree with this, where we kind of saw the real effects of climate change than the catastrophic bushfires that happened just before the pandemic began, right? And no one denied it. I mean, the Prime Minister was saying, okay, there is a direct link, we can see that. And all of a sudden, the rest of us non-Indigenous people said, seems that Aboriginal Australians who've been here for 60,000 years might have some ideas about how to mitigate, how to deal with this. How do you want to use Indigenous knowledge to kind of embed Indigenous knowledge in the way that we look to solving some of these problems?
Well, we need to be looking at listening to Aboriginal people for a start. And,
are we doing that?
Well, not properly. And we need to be being practical is the key. So when we look at Indigenous knowledge and how that's shared and being shared down for 1,000 generations, it's been through practical application. And that's how we need to be reapplying that knowledge and training our communities, training everybody, and demonstrating that knowledge and all its values. And not just with stopping the fires and leading towards that direction into the future, but also with the economy too. I mean, when we look at the landscape for Aboriginal people, it was the economy, the whole thing. And it was a healthy landscape that had lots of vegetation, had lots of animals, and now look at it, it's a depleting landscape. And we see the effects of wildfires and the effects of mismanagement of landscapes and our waterways that are leading to mass extinction. And when we see the loss of our vegetation, the loss of our plants, we start to see loss of our economy. And not just an economy of the way that Western people see that economy, but there's a whole untapped thing there going on. I mean, we're looking at credits as well with healing landscapes, but there's also opportunities around seeds, also invasive weeds and invasive plants that can be turned into product as we're healing landscapes. There's a whole range of opportunity there just with connecting with landscapes and making it healthy. So yeah, stopping the wildfires is the first step, but the other thing what fires do is to get that land healthy again. And if we start to demonstrate that, then we can start to get a healthy landscapes. We can start creating that seed in the sense of how that's going to help us with looking at the next crops for agriculture, how we improve agriculture with Indigenous knowledge, and how we create an economy that isn't corporatized as well, not fully corporatized, but also communitized. That's actually economy, parts of the economy that is for the community, and that the community can benefit from with healing landscapes and then maintaining healthy country that feed into economical opportunities into the future for our children and furthermore. And that's also including a better education system to support that.
Matt Keane, is that Indigenous knowledge kind of at the centre of government thinking?
No, it's not, but it has an important role to play. What we've learnt is that climate change needs a new approach in order to deal with that, and we need to not only consider the best science available, we need to bring past experience to the table if we're going to move forward and solve this massive problem. So, cultural burning, Indigenous practices are going to play a really vital role in setting us up for success in the future.
I want to stay with you before I get to the other panellists on, big announcement you made today. Love to know how Scott Morrison felt about it. You appointed the former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull to lead your task force on these issues. Why did you make that decision, and what do you want him to do? What's the missing part in terms of driving this?
I want him to help New South Wales win the race to become the leading economy in a net zero world. I want to make sure that communities like the Hunter and the Illawarra have jobs, good paying jobs, good industries that can export their products internationally and underwrite the prosperity of the next generation. And I don't think there's anyone better qualified in the country than Malcolm Turnbull. This guy's been a former environment minister, so he gets the environment. He's been a former prime minister of the country. He's also been a head of Goldman Sachs, and we're going to need that integration of business, of politics, of communication if we're going to bring the community with us and deliver what we need to do, what Ross has talked about, to set Australia up, to set New South Wales up to be an energy and economic superpower. I've got every confidence Malcolm's the right man for the job, the right person for the job, working with a great team that we'll announce shortly.
Matt, when you talk about, and this is what's so interesting about the way you talk about these issues, you talk about it as if there's a sort of business case, right? That it's positive for the New South Wales economy to move in this direction. But when we hear federal politicians, Zali, often there's this view that if you decarbonise, there's a real risk that it'll cost jobs, that it will hurt people. It was actually at the centre of the last election. Yeah. So, Zali, I know you've been concerned that all of the modelling goes up to 2030 and then it sort of drops off. We don't know what happens after then. What are your concerns around the way that sort of the projections are working?
Absolutely. I mean, there is so much opportunity, and it is so rewarding to hear our state governments embrace that opportunity, and it's why it's incredibly frustrating that at federal level there is still a block. There is a handbrake and an unwillingness to recognise the opportunity. In terms of, and that's just the part that, we look at through COVID, the government was able to embrace the science, embrace facts. We had first step, we need to keep the problem under control. Don't let it spread like crazy. We had lockdowns, we need to reduce our emissions. Second, we need to build our resilience. We built our health capacity. We need to build our risk and adaptation and resilience for climate. And third, we look at COVID, and in 12 months, a vaccine has been developed around the world. And so for a challenge like climate, we should be having all our energy into drawdown technologies and sequestration of how we're going to undo the damage we've already done. So I look at that leadership that we saw, and I must say it was driven by the states when it came to COVID. And I think we are missing that at federal level, and I'm trying to urge that. 12 months ago, the Prime Minister in question time would say net zero is going to wreck the economy. It's jobs or climate, and the irony is it's not or.
Look, I told everyone at the beginning of this that I would be taking audience questions, and we have one. I can pose it to anyone, so I'm going to pose it to you, Ross Garnaut, to start with. What do you say to your kids or your grandchildren? Australia is going to blow its carbon budget within the next decade. How do you maintain hope of a livable tomorrow? Ross Garnaut, bit of a curly one for you.
Yeah, I've got plenty of grandchildren, and I think we are in danger of letting them down. Well, up till now, we have let them down. We've just got to, for those of us who understand what's at stake, we've got to keep playing till the final siren, which is earlier for some of us than later, and we've got to keep talking across our community to bring everyone into the story. This is a story that's going to affect everyone. It will be devastating for future generations. If we don't get on top of it, we will all share a responsibility for not having carried our whole community.
Lisa, I want to ask you this question, because I think this is a really good one. And again, it's from an audience member, unnamed, but I'm sure they're wonderful people. What can we do to accelerate the transition right now that will make the most difference most quickly? And I wonder if with the circular economy frame...
Yeah, so look, I think there's a huge piece here about the market moving really quickly anyway, and in many ways government's playing catch up. And if you think about the fact that we've had solar panels, Australians rushing out to get solar panels to be self-sufficient. Batteries are coming in now, the price point's coming down. There's kit coming that's the size of a small fridge that can recycle 85% of the water in your home. People are going to be running out to get that as fast as they can. So I think that what we need to do is opening up our markets to new circular business models and understanding what sharing and reuse means. And at the moment, our regulatory structures and our tariff structures promote linear businesses. They promote throw away and flush away systems. And what we've got to do is understand what's the value of actually recycling, what's the value of keeping water locally for greening and for amenity, for agriculture and for productivity, and also to mitigate heat island effect. So I think there's a lot that needs to be done around our markets, and we've got near monopolies governing most of our utility and infrastructure sectors. We need to open them up to sharing and reuse business models.
Victor, I'm putting the grandchildren question that I put to Ross Garnaut to you as well. I kind of parked it before so that person gets a double answer. What is it that you sort of say? Is it a bleak message? Is it, oh, it's all over, we've lost this campaign, or do you feel hopeful still?
No, we can never be doom and gloom, and we can never tell our children that there's no hope, that's just, they don't want to hear that. And from my own experiences with many communities around, there is hope. I've seen the landscape regenerate, and I've seen communities regenerate. And I tell Aboriginal youth that the identity can be maintained and revived. And I tell non-Indigenous youth that there's a place for everyone to share in this country and share in the beautiful culture and the solutions into the future. And there's a way that everyone can play a part in that, and in evolving culture into the future together that respects people and respects place. That's all possible, but things need to happen now, and we need to get the support to start demonstrating those processes and accelerating that hope into the future right now. So there's no way in the world that I'm going to tell my children and my grandchildren that there's nothing we can do, because I know that there is something we can do. So I'm just calling out to the other side of the fence, where the corporates and the other Western sides of the economy can support that same way and learn from natural law and learn from traditional knowledge and thousands of years' experience of Indigenous cultures worldwide.
I mean, Patricia, what's interesting though is we do have to call out what happens. We've had 10 to 15 years of denial, where we've had sort of a really divisive debate around the science and accepting the facts. We're now in a phase where I would say it's about delay. So the delaying tactics of what can we do and the speed at which we transition and make change. But this is not an issue that is going away. This is going to accelerate. It is snowballing. It's going to get bigger and bigger. The impacts will get worse. So I would say everyone here on this panel and everyone watching, no one is going to let go of this. This is not going away.
There is no option.
There's no option.
There's no option.
This is a question for you, Matt Keane. Could you tell us what will replace the New South Wales Energy Savings Scheme that creates incentives for energy efficiency upgrades when the legislation finishes in 2025?
Yeah, so we've got the Energy Savings Scheme that's currently in place, but it's sort of an ad hoc approach to helping us reduce our emissions and making our system more efficient. What we've done as part of our net zero plan, and we've got a 35% emissions reduction target by 2030, is bring in an energy savings scheme or a demand response scheme as part of a suite of measures to help us get there. So we've got a demand response package, which will be part of our net zero plan, which will be overseen by Malcolm Turnbull. That will be about encouraging businesses to use energy at different times of the day to reduce demand on the grid. For example, if you add up all the pool pumps around New South Wales, and you use them in the middle of the day when we've got an abundance of wind and solar, that would replace, or that would prevent the need to build the equivalent generator the size of Liddell, just if you got them to switch on between sort of 11 and 1 o'clock. That's enough capacity to replace the Liddell coal-fired power station. So new technology is helping us to deliver on not only those emissions reductions targets, but guess what? Using appliances during the middle of the day will also save you money when you get your bill.
Ross Garnaut, if this minister in New South Wales, our biggest state in the country, is kind of going, full steam ahead, net zero emissions 2050, the other states and territories have signed up, where does that leave the federal government? Because we're a federation and it seems everyone's wanting to do it here.
Well, I think we can get a lot of the way. We can make good progress with what the states are doing. It'd just be much better if the...
Why would it be much better?
Well, first of all, the Commonwealth has most of the taxing powers of the Commonwealth, and so it's got a lot more money. And so if the New South Wales government is very sensibly putting a large amount of money behind the program that Malcolm Turnbull will lead. If the Commonwealth is supporting that as well, it can be much larger. It's simply the Commonwealth in our federation has most of the taxing powers and most of the income. There are some things that only the Commonwealth can do, or can only do effectively. The export opportunities I was talking about require cooperation with other states. If Europe committed to zero emissions industry in a couple of decades' time is going to have its companies buy zero emissions aluminium from Newcastle or zero emissions iron processed from Western New South Wales magnetite, they will only sign on to that if they're confident that Australia is part of that global effort. They're not going to sign on to absorbing imports from Australia if they don't think that Australia is contributing to their programs of decarbonisation. And so the Commonwealth has to build the international frameworks. Through voluntary methods, corporation to corporation cooperation, we can get some of the way. State governments can do some things, but creating the opportunities in international markets is especially a Commonwealth's responsibility.
Matt Keane, would you like to say that?
Well, what I will say in defence of the Commonwealth is that the New South Wales economy is very different to the Queensland economy, for example. So, we're largely a services-based economy, and our main export is coal, and that we know that those jobs in coal, those industries, are not going to be determined by domestic policies. It's going to be determined by decisions in Seoul and Tokyo and overseas. And we've got to prepare for that transition that we know is coming. I mean, if 50% of the world's GDP is generated in jurisdictions that have committed to net zero emissions, guess what? No matter how much the populist voices on Sky After Dark scream that no transition is happening, it doesn't matter, it's happening, right? So we've got a plan for that. We're really well placed to take advantage of the opportunities that are emerging. I mean, I'm not saying that we should just decarbonise the economy because I care about the environment and I respect the moral arguments. I'm saying it because I'm a capitalist and I want Australians to be really, really wealthy and enjoy the prosperity that our forefathers have enjoyed. So this is an economic case for me, and it's too big an opportunity not to grab.
Lisa, I want to ask you a question from one of our viewers out there in cyberspace. How can we get more products, the question is, in the market that can be repaired?
It's a really good point. We need new supply chains and circular supply chains. And so working out, we actually have to start from scratch in Australia because we've got so many linear systems that just don't support local jobs and support local solutions. So tackling and developing new circular supply chains is really important. Identifying some wastes. Some wastes actually need to be removed altogether from our economy, and that's the work of Matt and the ministers and other governments are doing, which is terrific. But then there's also sort of quite good markets that we can develop around repair and reuse, and I think it's something that's growing. It's something that cities like the City of Sydney and other cities are leading on, particularly local governments, because they're being overwhelmed by people that don't want to actually throw things out. So this emergence of local repair cafes and understanding, having places where you can go in your local community to take back dog toys, to take back bottle tops, plastics from bread containers that you can recycle into prosthetic limbs and things like this. So we will start to build those supply chains, and it's really important that we're getting attention from all levels of government, but we're also getting investment and research as a really important part, R&D, unlocking those opportunities to recycle more.
Victor, we've seen the election now of Joe Biden. It seems to be a new world order when it comes to trying to recommit on tackling climate change. Do you think that's going to change things dramatically here in our own debate in Australia?
Of course. I mean, we need to be tackling those issues, and we can't be separating those issues. We can't be saying like, it's all about the mismanagement. That's not climate change. It's all the above, and it's all got to be. It's all together, and we've got to treat it all as one. Just like we are just one with country, the problems are one as well, and we need to and face that all of that as one thing, and that's where we need to be heading in that direction for sure.
Zali, do you think the election of the Biden administration is a game changer?
I do, very much so. I believe under a Trump presidency, our Prime Minister Morrison had someone to hide behind when it came to inaction on climate change or inadequate action on climate change, and in terms of how we were accelerating our transition. With President Trump gone, President Biden is very much leading the way. The US are reclaiming that position around the world for leadership. We've seen Prime Minister Johnson in the UK very much make that a signature of his Prime Ministership as well. We've got Glasgow and COP26 coming up at the end of the year. We have the US summit coming in April. So yes, I think it is a game changer. Also, just from a market's point of view, the kind of power, the signals that can be sent from the US as such a large economy of facilitating those transitions. It's just, it really will make the difference, and it will accelerate transitions that are already happening here. It sends that signal for capital, for investment, to go into those technologies that have the backing that will deliver results.
Minister, I'm going to give you the final word on that. Is that a game changer? Will it change Australia's policies too?
It's a total game changer. It means that 70% of Australia's two-way trade is now with countries that have committed to hit net zero emissions. I mean, you know, it's an exciting time. Again, we've got the adults back in charge of the world, people that believe in science, making decisions based on expert advice, and it's an exciting time. So I think the momentum is there for real change, and it's not just progressive governments, it's also conservative governments. Look at Boris Johnson, look at Emmanuel Macron, look at Angela Merkel. You know, these are conservative governments taking action on climate change, not just because they care about the environment, because they want to grow their economies, they want to create jobs, and they want to underwrite the prosperity for their communities for generations to come. That's the chance that we need to grab, and grab it now.
Yeah, this is not a left-right thing.
No. Sorry, I want to say, like, people keep framing me as some kind of left-winger. There's nothing left-wing about me. Like,
not really.
There is nothing
They've
left-wing
missed the
about
point,
me.
really, haven't they?
This is...
What did you say? I'm doing this because I'm a capitalist. I loved it.
I'm a capitalist, right? But, you know, I'd also like to, you know, reframe this debate. This is the challenge of our times. You know, the challenge of my grandparents' times was, you know, going off to war to fight fascism and tyranny, to, you know, come back and protect our freedoms and build an egalitarian society. And the challenge of my parents' times was, you know, fighting for more women's rights and Indigenous rights and civil rights. The challenge of our times, Patricia, is tackling climate change, protecting our planet in a way that will create jobs and grow our economy. And, you know, this is not a left-right thing. This is the issue of our generation, and it's incumbent on us as community leaders, regardless of what your politics are, to go and step up to the plate. And it doesn't matter. There can be plenty of debate about how we reduce our emissions, whether you do it through taxes or regulation or whatever, but there should be no debate about the need to do so.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep, if anything, we've learnt from the pandemic, it's that the science should be the boss, right? Science is the boss. Hey, you guys have been such a great panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, before we finish, I want to acknowledge our speakers and panellists. They've been fantastic tonight. And thank you for the work tonight, their work and sharing their insights and being so generous with their time and answers too. Thank you to the City of Sydney and to the Lord Mayor. This video will be available on the City of Sydney City Talks website next week. Subscribe to the City Talks to be the first to find out who the next exciting speaker will be too. Now, pretty exciting tonight because I've promised you a very special performance. Here's Mykatia with her song Mother Earth.
We are born from the earth and we return to it. At the end of this life, it welcomes us home. So who are we to exploit all of its resources? Who are we to decide her destiny? Take care of this land and let her Listen to her wisdom. Let her thrive, let her breathe, let her be. Think of all the generations that are yet to come. All the life and all the light that hasn't seen the sun. We have an opportunity to do better. I'ma take this opportunity to do better. Take care of this land and let her care for you. Listen to her wisdom. Let her thrive, let her breathe, let her be. Let her thrive, let her breathe, let her be. Do you realize that in this very moment we're standing at a crossroads, the choice is ours to make. For future generations, their lives are in our hands. Which future will you choose? Take care of this land and let her care for you. Listen to her wisdom. Let her thrive, let her breathe, let her be. Take care of this land and let her care for you. Listen to her wisdom. Let her thrive, let her breathe, let her be. Let her thrive, let her be, let her breathe.
What an incredible performance by Maikesha, who wrote that song specifically for us tonight. Incredible. Look, thank you so much for your company tonight. I'm Patricia Karvelas. It's been great to have your company. We'll see you again.